Chapter 4. Classic Egyptian Myths. The Golden Lotus. There was once a great pharaoh who was named Seneferu. During the reign of Seneferu, Egypt was at peace. Seneferu had a large heart that abhorred warfare. Things like conquest and expansion meant very little to Seneferu. His attention was on maintaining peace and order throughout all of Egypt. His kind nature was reflected down onto his people, who honored Seneferu with great benevolence. He gave his people peace and stability, and his people returned his wise rulership with adoration and love. A mind without strife may wander too much. A body without a goal may develop idle hands. Seneferu had done so well as pharaoh that his nation was without war, and his people were without complaint. Seneferu was left without a challenge to surmount and became bored with the opulence that his kingship provided him. The beautiful maidens that attended to his every want, his comedic gestures, plays, and performances that were executed in his honor, all of these failed to enliven the heart of Seneferu. He appreciated the devotion of his loyal subjects, but none could appease his tired soul. He wanted to laugh or shed a tear of joy. He wanted to enjoy the splendor of life and partake in the advantages that were his birthright as pharaoh. Yet Seneferu had become downcast. The pleasures of being pharaoh had become too common and mundane. Seneferu awoke one morning and gazed upon the sunlight caressing his beloved Egypt. From his palace located in Memphis, his heart lifted as he watched the rays of Amun-Ra light up the home of his people. Then, with a joy trying to bud in his heart, he wandered his majestic palace in search of even more pleasure. As they always did, his people greeted him with love and adoration, but none could manage to keep the love flickering in his heart alive. By the end of the day, Seneferu grew bored once more. Under the light of the moon, he looked out over his land of Egypt again. He realized that he had spent too much time in his palace. He had brought a long session of peace to his people, but there was a price to pay for being such a devout and responsible leader. He had spent far too much time away from the beauty of the natural world. Seneferu was also shy of the water. He had a worry that, if he ventured too far away from land, then he may become lost at sea, which would leave his people without a pharaoh on the throne. Seneferu, the great man that he was, did not achieve such a peaceful era all on his own. One of his most trusted advisors was a magician named Zazamankh. For years, Zazamankh had whispered wisdom into Seneferu's ears and alerted him to hidden dangers that only the eyes of a magician could perceive. More than once, Zazamankh had performed miracles and prevented catastrophes. As Seneferu looked upon moonlit Egypt, he pontificated to his loyal handmaidens. "If there is any man who can remind my heart of a childlike entertainment, if there is any man who can unveil marvels that will restore wonder to my weary mind, it is Zazamankh." With a sudden flare, Seneferu pointed to his handmaidens and gave them an order. "I desire to speak with the wise scribe of the scrolls. Bring Zazamankh to me." Zazamankh took residence in a mysterious abode known as the House of Wisdom. It took an entire day for the pharaoh's servants to bring the magician to Seneferu's palace in Memphis. When he finally arrived, Seneferu bid him good hospitality, then went straight to making his request of the great mage. "Zazamankh, for so long you have not only gifted me with advice that is wise and true, but you have never ceased to fill my heart and head with new wonders." Zazamankh said nothing and only listened, as all wise mages are akin to do. Seneferu continued to state his troubles. "Throughout my entire palace I have searched for new delights, but none have been able to stir the joy of life back into me. This deeply concerns me. I ask again of your wisdom, Zazamankh. Please tell me, or show me, how I can fill my heart with pleasure once more." Zazamankh waited for his pharaoh to finish. He then knelt down before Seneferu and gave him a slight smile. O great Pharaoh, strength, life, and health be given to you." Just from hearing those few words alone, Senneferu began to grin back at Zazamankh. He knew no matter what, his greatest magician would not fail him. Senneferu had as much faith in Zazamankh as he had in the gods. Zazamankh then closed his eyes and entered into meditation. His astral stint was brief, for the answer to Senneferu's dilemma came to him very quickly. "I see," Zazamankh said before opening his eyes. "O great Pharaoh, my counsel is thus. You are to take a voyage and sail across the Nile, and then sail the lake below Memphis. The quickest way to remind your heart of the splendor that is beyond your palace is to step away for a spell, to step away from the land, and place your faith in the waters. If you follow my advice in all things, then you will learn that this will be no common voyage." Senneferu, a humble and reserved man, would usually wait to make a decision on such important matters. When advice was given from Zazamankh, though, he knew it to be better to act than wait. "If you claim that a voyage across the waters will remind my heart of marvels, then I will make the order to prepare my royal boat at once. However, you do know that I am apprehensive to leave my people and journey over the water. This will not be a normal voyage, my pharaoh," Zazamankh explained, still with the slight smile pressed on his lips. "Listen to my instructions before giving in to fear. First, you will select the most beautiful maidens that you have at your disposal to be the rowers of your boat. As you sit on your boat, you will be surrounded by the splendor of ibises on the waters. You will be surrounded by the splendor of the fields and grass upon the riverbanks. And you will be surrounded by the splendor of your lovely maidens as you watch them row together. When you have been surrounded by all of this, you will realize that your heart has grown glad again." The slight grin on Senneferu's face expanded as he listened to his magician's instructions. "Zazamankh, I place complete trust in you. I give you charge of this expedition." Senneferu then announced to his entire palace that he would soon be setting off on a voyage. He told all of his vassals that Zazamankh had been placed in charge of preparing for the expedition, and that they were all to do exactly as he said. "Consider Zazamankh's command to be my command," Senneferu ordered, and his people listened. Zazamankh went straight to work acquiring all that would be needed to set off on the voyage. He ordered for 20 oars to be fashioned from ebony that was to be inlaid with gold, and lightened blades of wood that were to have electrum placed inside of them. He and Senneferu then began to look over the maidens that resided in the pharaoh's palace. They selected 20 of the most beautiful women available, but also made sure that they were pure virgins and had long, flowing hair. Senneferu did not question the reasons why these specifics were needed, for he had total trust in Zazamankh. After the 20 maidens had been chosen, Zazamankh told Senneferu to give each one of them a golden net, which would be their only clothing while they rowed the boat. Zazamankh then told Senneferu to give each of the maidens 3 ornaments each. These ornaments were malachite, gold, and electrum. Zazamankh then told the maidens to wear these ornaments as they were rowing the royal boat. The ornament of gold was particularly important, for it was a golden lotus. All was done as Zazamankh had instructed. As the voyage sailed on, Senneferu took in the splendor of the world outside his palace that he had forgotten. The ibises on the water, the sun gleaming off the water, the cool wind on his flesh, and the sight of his beautiful maidens bending up and down while rowing his royal boat. These things started to lift up the spirit of Senneferu. He was reminded of the bygone days of Osiris. His maidens, the royal rowers, particularly reminded Senneferu to the notion of joy. None of the selected women had ever rowed a boat before, and all were a novice to such a strenuous activity. Yet, for their beloved pharaoh, they worked in perfect unison and even broke out into song. The sight of their bodies dipping up and down diligently in unison brought pleasure to his eyes, while the sonorous sound of their singing brought an equal joy to his ears. Zazamank's plan was working just as well as Seneferu had assumed it would. As the voyage continued, a misfortune befell one of the rowers. One of the women lost her grip on her oar, and when it slipped, it grazed the head of the woman rowing next to her. No one was injured, but the golden lotus that was resting in the maiden's hair was knocked off her head and fell into the water, where it instantly began to sink. The maiden let out a soft cry and ceased both her rowing and singing. She reached down into the water but couldn't reach the sinking golden lotus. When she released her oar, the other rowers lost the rhythm that they had found between each other. They also lost the tune of the song they were singing. When the golden lotus fell into the water, the pleasure of the voyage suddenly came to a stop. "What is wrong?" Seneferu asked. "Why have you all ceased to row and sing?" The maiden who had lost her golden lotus stepped forward, and with tears in her eyes knelt before her pharaoh. "O great pharaoh, strength, life, and health to you. I lost my golden lotus when another oar grazed my head. The gift you have given me before setting off on this voyage is now lost. I beg forgiveness, great pharaoh." "Calm down and fret no longer," Seneferu told her. "Continue to row and sing. I will give you another golden lotus when we return to the land." The maiden explained that would not suffice. She grieved that a replacement would never equal the original gift that Seneferu had given to her. She begged forgiveness again while telling Seneferu that she was too distraught to continue rowing or singing. Without her to help, the other women could not row the boat or sing. Seneferu called forth Zazamank, who was resting in the lower quarters of the boat. When the maiden explained to Zazamank why she was too distraught to continue rowing, Zazamank then gave his attention to Seneferu. "Zazamank," Seneferu began speaking, "my brother and friend, I have followed your advice, and by doing so my heart has remembered joy. The splendor of nature that surrounds me, the beauty of my royal rowers, and the lovely songs they sing have all done me a great service. This venture has reminded me of the golden days of Re or Osiris, yet our pleasure has suddenly stopped. What do we do about this lost golden lotus and this heartbroken maiden? Even more than my own pleasure, I desire to see the joy return to the eyes of this royal rower in despair." "Is that all?" Zazamank asked, with a slight smile on his lips. "Consider this apparent trouble to be a gift in disguise. Prepare to see the greatest marvel that this voyage will reveal." Zazamank then approached the edge of the boat and lifted up his wand. With eyes closed, he began to chant unknown words of power. He began to twirl his wand while focusing his energy on the water beneath him. Seneferu and his 20 maidens watched in amazement as the river began to separate as if it was cut in half by an invisible sword. 2 pillars of water rose high and stood erect as if they were solid instead of liquid. The boat gently lowered down until it was resting at the bottom of the lake. There at the bottom before the boat was the lost golden lotus. The heartbroken maiden leaped for joy and hopped out of the boat. She instantly picked the lotus back up and fastened it to her hair. She then climbed back inside and not only took the oar back into her hand, but started to sing again. Zazamank then lowered his rod and silenced his chanting. Slowly, the water returned to normal and the boat lifted back up to rest upon the water. The sight of this magical act filled Seneferu's heart with even more wonder. "Zazamank, you truly are the greatest and wisest of all magicians. I hereby decree that whatever you desire will be given to you. From this day onward, what is my treasure will also be your treasure." "Thank you, great pharaoh," Zazamank said. "Yet, I have everything I already need. If you require my assistance, I will be below in my cabin." The voyage continued into the late evening. Seneferu continued to watch his maidens work together under the glow of the moon. He continued to soak in the sights of the nature that surrounded him. Even more, he continued to listen to the lovely song his maidens sang. dedicated to old Egypt. She stands upon the farthest side. Between us the Nile flows. A snake hides in those waters. Yet my love is true and sweet. The stream is between my feet. It bears me no harm. I shall come to where she stands, never again to be held apart. I shall take my darling's hand, then draw her to my heart. The Book of Thoth. There was once a son of a pharaoh who was named Setna. While the other royal children were regaling in the privileges that were given to them at birth, Setna's main passion was the art of magic. Setna regularly shunned the interests of others and preferred to sit with his books and tomes in silence and privacy. He could read the most ancient of hieroglyphics, knew several languages, was a mathematician, and had acquired magical knowledge and ability that no one could compete against. While he was reading one of his ancient magical scrolls, he stumbled upon a story that greatly piqued his interests. Apparently, there was an even greater magician than himself, who was called Neferkeptah. According to the scroll, Neferkeptah once had a very powerful book of spells in his possession. This book was said to teach a man how to speak with the animals, levitate objects, and many other wondrous miracles. This book was called the Book of Thoth, and it was rumored to be written by none other than Thoth himself, the wisest of all the gods. As Setna continued to read more of the scroll, he learned that the Book of Thoth was supposedly buried in the tomb where Neferkeptah's body was laid to rest in the city of Memphis. Setna set out for Memphis right away to search for this tomb, find the Book of Thoth, and make all of its secret knowledge his. He asked his brother, Anheru, to assist him in his search and journey. Anheru was delighted to give help to his brother, and the two traveled all the way to the city of Memphis. Once there, they were able to locate the tomb of Neferkeptah without much difficulty. Most of the people who lived in Memphis knew about Neferkeptah's tomb and stayed far away from it, for it was said to be cursed. Setna, being a powerful mage, was not worried about a curse or anything else. He needed to make the Book of Thoth his, and was willing to brave any danger to get it. When he came upon Neferkeptah's tomb, he saw that it was sealed without any entrance. He stood before the sealed pyramid and focused his concentration, chanted words of power, and made a wish for the tomb to open up before him. After several moments, his spell worked, and a wall of the tomb began to slide and crunch about until it had peeled enough of itself open for Setna and his brother to slip inside. Setna and Anheru wandered the dark dwelling until they found the coffin of Neferkeptah. His body had been mummified, and a variety of decorative ornaments were surrounding him, but none of that captured Setna's attention. Two statues are on both sides of Neferkeptah's mummy. One was the statue of a young boy, and the other was of a beautiful young woman. Setna quickly discarded both of these as unimportant when he saw that his prize, the Book of Thoth, was resting on the chest of the deceased Neferkeptah. Setna bowed before the mummy and statues and offered up a prayer and an order. "My name is Setna, the son of the pharaoh, and I offer honor to you, great Neferkeptah. I have come for the Book of Thoth, so I can learn of its secrets. I beg of you to let me take it without resistance. If you do not, I will pit my magic against your own and take it by force. Leave now and forget about Thoth's book." The statue of the woman began to speak to Setna. Anheru was shocked when he heard the statue talk, but Setna the mage was familiar with the fantastic and whimsical. "If you take the book, then a curse will fall upon you as it did my husband Neferkeptah. My name is Ahura, and I was the wife of Neferkeptah. The other statue you see before you is of our son, Merab. Merab and I were buried far away from here near the city of Thebes, longing for the day where we may be reunited with the husband and father that we loved so much. Now, listen to my warnings, Setna, for the Book of Thoth was never meant to be read by mortals." The soul of Ahura told Setna that like him, Both she and Neferkepta were the children of a pharaoh. According to the customs at the time, they were married and gave birth to their son Merab. Yet Neferkepta was very much like Setna. He cared far more for learning the secrets of the mysteries and mastering the art of magic more than anything else, including his own family. One day, while discussing with a priest of Thoth, Neferkepta learned about the book that was written directly by Thoth himself and badgered the priest to find out where it was located. The priest offered to tell Neferkepta where the book was hidden for a hefty price of 100 bars of silver. Neferkepta used his magical powers to quickly acquire the payment and happily made the priest a rich man. Then the priest told Neferkepta to go to the city of Koptos and explore the Nile. Hidden in the Nile was a box inside of a box inside of a box, and in the final box he would find the book he so desperately wanted to read. Yet, to receive the book, he would have to defeat the spirits that guarded it, which were a large scorpion and a snake that was blessed with immortality. Neferkepta told Ahura that he was going to set off on a journey to recover the Book of Thoth, but she tried to convince him not to go. She knew better than to steal something that belonged to a god and worried that if her husband had followed through with his desire, then a horrible curse would fall upon him. Neferkepta could not be swayed, though, and he left to retrieve the book, curse or no curse. Though Ahura was reluctant, she went with her husband and their son to the city of Koptos. 5 days after reaching Koptos, Neferkepta had grown impatient in his search for the book and cast several spells to expedite finding it. He summoned up workmen from the mud, artificial humans that were only created to dig and labor in search of the book. Without rest or pause, the servitors of Neferkepta scoured the Nile, and on the 3rd day, they had found the boxes that were said to contain the book that had been written by Thoth. Using his magic, Neferkepta levitated the boxes out of the water and placed them on a shoal near the edge of the Nile. He then saw the giant scorpion that the priests had warned him about and instantly cast a binding spell upon it, which paralyzed the book's guardian and froze it in place. Arrogantly, Neferkepta walked unharmed past the frozen scorpion and used his magic to undo the locks on every box, opening them one by one until the Book of Thoth was resting before his very eyes. Then the snake that was said to be immortal revealed itself and coiled about the book, hissing and spitting a lethal venom. Neferkepta tried several different spells to thwart the beast, but none worked. So, he pulled out his sword and sliced off the snake's head with one clean swipe. Yet the head began to move on its own, still spitting venom, until it crawled back onto the body that it had been cut away from and bonded again with the snake. Neferkepta didn't back down, however, and sliced the creature's head off again before using his magic to hurl the severed head into the Nile. But then, proving its immortality even further, the snake bubbled and vibrated until another head had grown out of its scales, and it continued to spew venom at Neferkepta. Even then, Neferkepta would not back down, and he cut off the snake's head again. Before it could rejoin or fuse another head, Neferkepta used his magic to move the sands and cover the immortal snake's wound. The head of the snake could not bond with the sand that was covering the body, nor could a second head have grown where the sand was blocking it. The immortal guardian writhed on the ground in 2 separate pieces and forgot all about Neferkepta as it tried and failed to fuse its head with its body. With all threats removed, Neferkepta approached the book that was more important to him than anything else. With a stern focus, he opened the Book of Thoth and began to read the first page. Then an unknown force of wisdom was thrust into Neferkepta. His eyes changed and shifted through every spectrum of color before a haunting wind passed over him. Suddenly, the powers of both heaven and earth were at his command. He then read the next page and gazed at the sky. "I can hear them," Neferkepta said. "I can hear the voices of the planets and stars. I dare not translate what they are telling me, but I understand every single word." He then picked up the precious book, nuzzled it against his cheek, and gave a command to the workmen that he had manifested to scour the Nile. "My servants, I command you to take me back to my home." Neferkeptah then returned to Ahura, and though she feared the power of the book, she read the first page. Without realizing it, without even wanting it, the powers of heaven and earth were bestowed upon her as well. She read further, and after finishing the second page, she gazed up at the night sky above. Like her husband, she could hear the thoughts of the planets and stars and learned that they were very displeased that two mortals had read the most sacred of all books. Although Ahura was becoming only more concerned about taking the book, her husband continued to remain unabashed or intimidated. He then poured beer over the book, defacing it, and poured the beer into a cup which he then drank. By doing this, he had absorbed the knowledge of the book into his very being, which was something that was only supposed to be a practice of the gods and not a mortal man. Ahura swore to never touch the book again and prayed to the gods for forgiveness for both herself and her husband. They then began their journey back home. While they were sailing, a sudden power had taken over their son Merab, as if an invisible hand had seized him. He was lifted up into the air without the wind of a storm and thrown into the sea, where he instantly sank out of sight. Neferkeptah countered with his own magic and hoisted his son out of the water, but it was too late. Merab was dead by then, and his flesh was already decaying as if he had been a corpse rotting in the ground for weeks. Neferkeptah looked through the Book of Thoth for a spell of resurrection, but could find none. Necromancy, the ability to raise the dead, was so forbidden that not even Thoth had written any spell of its type. He did find something close to necromancy in the Book of Thoth, though. There was a spell to speak with the dead, and Neferkeptah executed it and asked the soul of Merab what had happened and why he had been thrown into the sea. The soul of Merab told him that Thoth has learned that his book has been stolen. He has sent down a curse to you and all of your family, father. I was just the first victim to be taken by the vengeance of Thoth, but there will be many more tragedies unless you return the book. Ahura and Neferkeptah paused their journey home to bury their son. Ahura was sure that Neferkeptah would return the book after that, but even then his greed for power would not leave him be. Unfettered, he returned back to his home with the sacred book, which was more important to him than even the life of his own son. As they were sailing back again, Ahura sat in her cabin mourning her lost child. Then a spell of possession overcame her. As Merab had done, she walked out to the edge of the boat, was lifted into the air by an invisible hand, and was plunged deep into the sea. Neferkeptah repeated what he had done when Merab died. He used the Book of Thoth to speak to her spirit, and she told him the same thing that Merab did. The curse of Thoth had killed her the same way it had killed Merab, and the curse would not be lifted until the book was returned to where it belonged. Neferkeptah ceased his return home again and held a second funeral, this time for Ahura. She was buried beside the body of Merab in Koptos, and then Neferkeptah began another journey back home, still with the sacred book of the gods in his possession. When his ship finally reached the city of Memphis where Neferkeptah had come from, no one ever stepped off the boat. His father, the pharaoh, decided to examine the boat himself and found the body of Neferkeptah dead inside his cabin. Plunged in his hands was the Book of Thoth. Unlike Merab and Ahura, Neferkeptah was buried in the city of Memphis, while the bodies of his wife and child remained in Koptos. And ever since then, Setner, Merab and I have been watching over the soul of my husband, who is not allowed to follow Anubis and perform the path of Osiris, for his soul has been cursed to watch over Thoth's book for all eternity, the ghost of Ahura told Setner. Setner listened to the entire story that the spirit of Ahura had told him, and he was not impressed. I believe myself to be a far more powerful magician than your husband, he told the ghost. The Book of Thoth will be mine, and if any curse dares threaten me, then I will remove it of my own volition. The book is not for you, Setna. It belongs to Thoth. Do not challenge a god. Give me the book now, he told her, or I will prove to you how powerful my magic is. Ahura then vanished. She had given her warnings, and that was all she could do. So be it. You will die after watching the ones you love perish, were her parting words to him. Setna reached out for the book, but then another spirit rose before him. The soul of Neferkeptah himself stepped out of his mummified corpse and blocked Setna's path to the book. Even after hearing all of this, you still plan a fool's errand. Neferkeptah spoke to Setna. The book will be mine, Setna challenged. I am the greatest magician in all of Egyptian history. Where you failed to control the power of the book and defend against the curse, I will succeed. The ghost of Neferkeptah gave lament for the ignorant youth, but accepted his commitment. He told Setna that if he desired the book that much, then he must defeat him in several different matches of chess. If you win 52 games, then the book is yours. If I win 52 games, then the book remains with me. Setna accepted the challenge. The two magicians manifested a chessboard and all its pieces, then began their contest. For 2 days the matches carried on. Setna did not stop to eat or sleep. Nothing mattered to him besides winning the ancient book. The two mages traded victories back and forth. Some games Setna won, while others he lost. Each time Setna lost a game, the ground of the tomb opened up and swallowed him inch by inch. Eventually, both of the mages had tied the game at 51 wins each, and were both 1 win away from becoming the winner of the contest. By then, the only part of Setna's body that was sticking out of the ground was his head, and he had to use his magic to move the chess pieces. During all of this, his brother Anheru had watched the entire contest from a safe distance. When Setna was nothing more than a head sticking out of the ground, he told his brother to go to his cabin and retrieve his sacred amulet. This book will be mine, Setna wailed while stuck in the floor of the tomb. Brother, fetch my amulet and place it on my head. If I am to lose again, only the power of my amulet will be able to protect me. At once Anheru set off to retrieve Setna's amulet and bring it to him. When he returned with the magic jewel, Neferkeptah was about to make his last move in the final game of chess. He was all about to announce checkmate when Anheru ran up and draped the amulet over Setna's head. As soon as the amulet touched Setna's brow, he sprang from the ground and snatched the book directly from the body of Neferkeptah and ran off. Not only have you stolen the book, Neferkeptah said, but you have ignored the rules of the game that you agreed to. A poor magician you are, Setna. Despite your arrogance and guile, you do not have the power you think you do. One such as you will never be able to banish the curse of Thoth. When Setna and Anheru reached outside, the tomb closed before them on its own, as if it had never been opened at all. Setna and Anheru then returned to their home. While they journeyed back, no misfortune fell upon them, and Setna spent the entire time reading Thoth's book. Upon reaching home, Setna proudly showed his father, the pharaoh, that he had done the impossible and stolen the holy book. "You fool," his father lambasted him. "Return that book instantly, and do so with respect and dignity. Do this before the curse of the gods falls upon all of our houses." Setna didn't listen. He instead continued to study the book and brag about having acquired it to anyone who would listen. He even read the book to others and shared the secrets of the god that were never meant to be heard by mortal ears. Since no misfortune had fallen upon him, he assumed that he had banished the curse successfully. One day, Setna saw a maiden more beautiful than he had ever seen was walking through the courtyard of the palace. Upon seeing her, Setna became enamored and went to pursue her. He learned that her name was Tabubua and tried to court her. She was so splendidly lovely that Setna had even forgotten about the Book of Thoth as he lustfully looked over her. She told him that she was the daughter of a priest who worshipped Bastet, and that she would love to share a meal with him. The two of them dined together and shared many stories. During the course of the meal, Setna confessed his love for her, and she told him that she returned his adoration in kind. "Yet there are rules you must follow to win my hand," Tabubua told him. "I know that you have a wife and children of your own, Setna, and I refuse to have a rival of the heart. Before we are to wed, you must write a document of divorce and disown your children. Then you must offer up your children to my goddess Bastet as a sacrifice. Then the goddess will know you are true to your word, and you will win my hand." Without thinking, Setna wrote up a document of divorce and cast a magical conjuring over it. He used his power that he had learned from the Book of Thoth to override the laws of man and decree directly with the gods that he was divorcing his wife, disowning his children, and offering them as a sacrifice to Bastet. He then waited for an answer from the stars and listened. He could see in a vision that his wife was turned into a beggar wandering the streets, and saw his own children dead and lying before the feet of Bastet. The feline goddess picked up Setna's first child and bit his head right off of his body before she swallowed it down. He continued to watch as Bastet ate all of his children. Then he turned back to Tabubua and told her that the deed was done. "Then I am yours." Tabubua embraced him. Overjoyed, Setna went to kiss her, but then her beautiful face and supple body began to wither and decay in his arms. Setna dropped the disfigured corpse and screamed. An enveloping darkness began to swirl around him, and then he awoke in the middle of the road outside of the city gates. A dream? Tabubua was not real, but just a conjuring of the mind. Setna returned home and found that his wife and children were still alive. He thanked the gods for their mercy and decreed to return the book that he had stolen at once. He understood that the dream had been his final warning, and soon the curse of Thoth would fall upon him. Setna returned to Memphis and opened the tomb of Neferkepta as he had done before, and returned the book where it belonged. Before he left, he was visited by the ghost of Neferkepta again and given another message. "Your arrogance has gone too far, Setna. The curse is not yet broken. To fully lift the curse and prevent the dream of Tabubua from becoming a reality, you must follow my instructions and redeem yourself." Setna asked what he was to do, and Neferkepta told him to go and retrieve the bodies of Merab and Ahura. He was to bring their bodies to his tomb and bury them with Neferkepta. "When I am rejoined with my family in death, the curse will be lifted from you." When Setna reached Koptos, he searched diligently for the bodies of Merab and Ahura, but could not locate them. He asked several of the locals and priests, but none knew what he was talking about. Setna had all but given up when an old man stumbled upon him and gave him the information he was looking for. "You are Setna, are you not? You are looking for the bodies of Merab and Ahura, are you not? If you are, then you must follow me." Setna gave no argument or speculation and followed the old man. The old man led him directly to where the bodies of Merab and Ahura were hidden, and then told Setna that he was not really an old man, but the ghost of Neferkepta who had come to help Setna retrieve the bodies. Setna bid him thanks, and then used his royal father's resources to dig up the bodies and place them in the tomb of Neferkepta. Setna's father, the pharaoh, proceeded over the moving of the bodies and funeral himself, and then Setna cast a spell over the tomb. He covered it up with the sons of Egypt and hid it from the eyes of the mortals for the rest of eternity. The Book of Thoth had been restored to its resting place, and Neferkepta was reunited with his family. Setna was a changed man after all of this, but he still had more ordeals to go through before his time on the mortal coil was expired. Say Osiris and the Sealed Letter. The son of Setna was named Say Osiris in honor of the great god Osiris. By the age of 12, Osiris had become a powerful magician in his own right, and could even rival the skulls of his father. Once, a visitor from Ethiopia came to greet the pharaoh. The Ethiopian visitor had been sent by his king to offer a challenge to the people of Egypt, and after bowing to the pharaoh in a showing of respect, announced what the challenge was. "In my hand I hold a sealed letter," the Ethiopian told the pharaoh. "My king wonders if the magic of Egypt is really as powerful as the rumors say. Gather up your mages and priests and see if they can read what is written on this letter without breaking the seal. If they can, then I will return to Ethiopia and extol the greatness of Egyptian magic. But if they cannot, then you will be the laughingstock of all the world's magicians." Hearing this greatly offended the pharaoh, and he summoned all of his priests and mages, including Setna. Each one of them tried to read the scroll without unraveling it or breaking the seal, but none could even read a single letter. When it was Setna's turn, he used his magic to see what cannot be seen, but even his magic failed to reveal to him the contents of the letter. For all of Setna's power, having the Book of Thoth in his possession for so long had taken a toll on his soul and weakened him after the book was returned. Yet, Setna developed a plan to appease the pharaoh and impress the Ethiopians. He told the pharaoh to treat the Ethiopian vassal as a guest and let him sleep in the palace for the night. While he was sleeping, Setna would find another mage besides himself to read the letter without breaking the seal. The pharaoh was desperate to retain the pride of Egypt and agreed to Setna's plan. While the Ethiopian enjoyed the privileges of being a guest of honor, Setna returned to his home and told his family of the promise he had made to the pharaoh. Setna admitted he had spoken in haste. In truth, he did not know any mage that would be able to read a sealed letter. When Osiris heard the story, he burst out in laughter. "This is no trouble at all, father," Osiris told Setna. "This is a gift from the gods. They must want Egypt to prove that we have the best magicians. It so happens that I have specifically been practicing how to read words that are unseen, and have become quite good at it. I will read this letter that has been sent from Ethiopia." Setna did not believe his son, but when Osiris told him to retrieve a letter from his study to prove that he could read what was unseen, Setna did so immediately. Without showing Osiris what was written in the letter, his son repeated the notation written on the letter perfectly, word for word. Satisfied and confident, Setna took his son to meet the pharaoh and the Ethiopian the next day. "I thank you for your hospitality, Pharaoh of Egypt," the Ethiopian said. "Yet we must now end this contest. Produce a mage who can read my sealed letter, or else I will have to return to my kingdom and tell the entire world that the magic of Egypt does not deserve the reputation it has garnered." "I agree," the pharaoh said. "It is time to prove to the rest of the world the power of Egyptian magic. Setna, where is this magician you said you can produce?" "Right here," Setna said. Osiris then strode over to the Ethiopian. Everyone present knew that Osiris was Setna's son and did not trust one so young to be the answer to the Ethiopian's challenge. There was a murmur of uncertainty throughout the pharaoh's hall. Setna could feel the doubt and tension collecting around him, but still held complete faith that his son would silence every ounce of skepticism. "Osiris, prove your mettle and worth," Setna told his son. Osiris focused his attention on the letter in the Ethiopian's hands. He stared at it for a solid minute, concentrating on its shape and texture. He then closed his eyes, inhaled and exhaled several deep breaths, and said, "The sealed letter tells of a story that happened 500 years ago. It tells of a king who once sat on the throne of Ethiopia and overheard a discussion amongst his magicians. His mages were talking about how weak the magic of Egypt was, and they were discussing how they could easily destroy our entire country with only a single spell. When the king heard this, he asked his mages if what they said was true, and then asked them to prove it by casting a spell over all of Egypt. His best magician then manifested artificial men from mud and clay and sent them into Egypt to kidnap the pharaoh." Osiris then turned to the Ethiopian guest and asked him if he was so far reading the letter correctly. The Ethiopian bowed before him and admitted that Osiris was correct. Osiris then continued to read the rest of the sealed letter. The Ethiopian's spell worked. His servitors kidnapped the pharaoh and stole him into Ethiopia. They publicly beat him with 500 lashings and then returned the broken pharaoh back to Egypt. Our pharaoh was deeply enraged by this and summoned his own magicians to seek vengeance. His most powerful mage gave him a pendant of protection and told him to wear it around his neck as he slept. The pharaoh did as his mage told him, and the next night the servitors of the Ethiopian mage returned to kidnap the pharaoh again. When they went to seize him, the protective pendant activated, and before the pharaoh's eyes all of the invaders were surrounded by a plume of fire and were burned to ash. The pharaoh and his magician then created their own artificial men and sent them to Ethiopia to kidnap the king and drag him back to Egypt. After they had done so, the king of Ethiopia was beaten with 500 whacks of wooden clubs and then returned to his kingdom as a broken man. The king of Ethiopia tried to have a protective charm created for himself, but his mages could not produce one that was stronger than the magic of Egypt. For 3 nights, the king was kidnapped and beaten in Egypt, then returned to Ethiopia. On the 4th day, he humbled himself before the glory of our pharaoh, and then was beaten no more. He banished his own magicians from his kingdom and told them not to return until they had found a spell that would embarrass all of Egypt. Osiris then looked back to the Ethiopian visitor and asked him again if what he had said was written on the sealed letter. "It is true," the Ethiopian visitor said. He then broke the seal on the letter and read what was written. His words matched exactly the story that Osiris had told. "I admit that the magic of Egypt is great." The Ethiopian visitor apologized and then begged to be set free and leave in peace. Yet Osiris stopped him. "My pharaoh, you should not let this scourge leave. I have seen something else that was not written in the letter at all. This man is no common messenger. He is the mage that kidnapped our pharaoh and was banished from Ethiopia 500 years ago. He has cast a spell of youth upon himself and has been waiting all this time for our country to forget about the old feud with Ethiopia. And now he has come back in a paltry attempt to embarrass us further. The current king of Ethiopia does not even know who this man is. He has come here to do this of his own will. I say we end this grudge, here and now." "You dog," the Ethiopian wizard cried. "How dare you unveil my scheme?" Then the pharaoh gave Osiris a command. "My grandson, son of Setna, Osiris the Great, my responsibilities as pharaoh have kept me from watching you grow so powerful. Yet I ask you now to finish this feud and prove to this Ethiopian invader how foolish it has been to maintain his grudge for so long." "As you command, my pharaoh," Osiris said. "Never," shouted the Ethiopian. "I will kill you all." He then pointed his hand at the floor and began to chant a word of power. Beneath his feet a black void spawned, and out of it began to slither a giant serpent. The serpent moved quickly and bypassed everyone, heading straight for the pharaoh. Osiris then laughed and snapped his fingers, and the serpent transformed into a harmless worm that slugged about at the pharaoh's feet. The Ethiopian mage then conjured a sphere of dark energy and hurled it at the pharaoh like a bolt of lightning. Osiris simply stepped in front of it, caught the sphere in his hands, and crushed it between his fingers as if it were brittle wood. Panicking, the Ethiopian then conjured a trail of fire and sent it directly after Osiris. With another laugh, Osiris put up his hand in front of the rushing flame. "Away with you," he told the fire. The flame then turned around and returned to the Ethiopian. It clung to his body and reduced him to ash before he even had a chance to scream. The 500-year feud had been settled. The fame of Setna's son, Osiris, began to be sung through all the land of Egypt, and their reputation for having the most powerful magic in the entire world remained intact. Yet, that was only the beginning of the legend of Osiris. The Land of the Dead. Setna and Osiris were watching a pair of funerals from out of the window of their home. The first funeral was for a wealthy merchant. There were ornaments of gold decorating his casket, and his corpse was gifted with an assortment of valuable treasures. The second funeral was for a poor laborer, and he was given no gifts in death. When it is my time to enter the duat, I hope that my funeral is like the wealthy merchant and not the poor laborer, Setna told his son. I disagree, father, Osiris said. I hope you are honored as the poor laborer was. These words wounded Setna. Then Osiris explained what he meant by them. What you see here matters little in the duat. What truly matters is what happens when the heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Often, the rich do much evil and never complete the path of Osiris, while the poor often find that their heart is lighter than a feather. How do you know this? Setna asked his son. Osiris explained that he had visited the duat before, via the power of his magic. If anyone else had made such a claim, Setna would label them a liar, but he knew better than to question the words of his son. May you show me how to enter the underworld while still alive? Setna asked Osiris. Why don't we go there right now? The son said to his father. They then began a spell of astral projection which gave homage to all the gods of the entire Egyptian pantheon. They offered up many sacrifices and spent over 8 hours in meditation. Then Anubis came before them. I have heard your prayer, Osiris. I warn you not to cast this spell again. Yet, since both of you have followed the law of Ma'at diligently, and since you have learned your lesson after stealing Thoth's book, Setna, you may travel to the underworld this once. I will repeat this, though. Do not cast this spell again. Setna and Osiris thanked Anubis. Then their souls flew out of their bodies and entered the underworld. When their souls entered the underworld, they had shed the skin of their mortal coil. They were formless spirits, wings without a body, that floated along the ethereal coast where the dead were judged. They explored the underworld region by region, carefully remaining silent as to not anger the gods presiding over the dead or stir the agents of chaos that lived in the underworld. The first region of the underworld was nothing more than a dark void that resembled the noon. It was a liquid void where all was silent and black. There were many great monsters hiding in those dark depths, but the pair of mages had managed to hide their essence from all of them and safely made it through to the next area. When they made it to the second region, they saw Amun-Ra steering his brilliant and godly ship. The golden hue of Amun-Ra's ship blinded the two mages. Even when they were in astral form, they could not get a good look at it. It was too bright for even a soul to look upon. When they came upon the third region, they saw Anubis leading a collection of the dead along the trenches of the underworld. Some of the spirits following Anubis had no trouble keeping up with him, while others were swallowed by phantom crocodiles, serpents, and spiders. In the next region, they watched a man's soul stand before one of the 42 judges of Ma'at. He called out the judge's name and then performed his negative confessions. Osiris had seen this before and would follow Anubis's advice and never return to watch again as long as he was alive. Setna had never seen the trials of the dead before and watched in awe and wonder. They traveled further and then came upon the pinnacle of the underworld, the Hall of Two Truths, where the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. This was the scene that Osiris wanted Setna to see, and Setna was anxious to learn what truly happened when the heart was weighed against the feather of truth. They saw the wealthy merchant, whose funeral they observed earlier, step up to Anubis. Anubis reached inside the soul's chest and yanked his heart from his undead body. He then placed the heart on the scale, with Ma'at's feather on the other side, and waited. The side with the heart dipped down, confirming that the wealthy merchant had not lived a life that followed Mahat's law, and Anubis shook his head in disappointment. "You have failed to live a worthy life. Your actions were not in accordance with the balance of nature. Because of this, you will be swallowed by Amit." Amit then rose from the depths of the underworld. The monster was larger than the planet Earth itself. One single tooth of the beast was large enough to pierce a star. Satna watched the hideous disfigured monster and tried to make out what type of an abomination it was. Was it a hippopotamus? Was it a crocodile? Was it a snake? Was it all three? Satna couldn't decide, for the beast was a hybrid of too many things that did not exist in the mortal realm. Whatever Amit was supposed to be, it swallowed the soul of the wealthy merchant and then disappeared back into the depths where it had arisen from. After the rich merchant was erased from existence, the poor laborer was next. This did not surprise Satna, since their funerals were held almost at the same time. With unrestrained curiosity, Satna awaited to see what the poor laborer's fate would be. Anubis yanked the heart out of the poor man's soul and placed it on the scale with the feather. After a moment of excruciating anticipation, the scale still did not move. Anubis then returned the heart to the laborer and bowed before the man who had always lived a life of struggle and servitude. "Your heart is as light as a feather. You have left the world of the living without disturbing the balance between order and chaos. You have lived a life according to the law of Mahat. She has given you passage to complete the path of Osiris. You may be reborn on the heavenly sphere of the Duat. Congratulations for receiving the second birth of immortality, and thank you for honoring the law of Mahat." The soul of the laborer then was lifted up where it joined a ball of light. Satna did not know what this light was at first, but then he realized that it was the collection of souls who had completed the path to Osiris. More souls then came to Anubis and had their hearts weighed against the feather of Maat. Some of them also joined the light that was waiting to meet Osiris, while others were swallowed by Amit. Eventually, Amun-Ra's ship sailed over the head of Anubis. Amun-Ra, the king of the gods himself, took the collection of lawful souls aboard his ship and then began both his ascent back to the world of the living and his delivery of the just souls to Osiris. Setnir was greatly excited to see Osiris welcome the souls which were worthy, but that was not to be. Anubis pointed to the two mages and gave an order. "Take what you have learned here back home with you, and do not return here ever again while you are still alive." Setnir and Osiris both awoke back in their home. After they had both reclaimed a normal consciousness, Osiris said something to his father. "Now, do you understand why I would rather have you be honored as a poor man instead of a rich one?" Ever since Setnir had stolen the Book of Thoth, he had learned more through his mistakes and failures than he had through his victories. Between the curse of Thoth, the Ethiopian mage who tried to trick all of Egypt, his journey into the underworld, and accepting that his own son was a more powerful magician than himself, Setnir started to understand what the meaning of life truly was. Everything that every man and woman ever did or went through was a test to see which side they belonged to, order or chaos. Setnir spent the rest of his life upholding the truth of Maat and only using his power to restore the delicate balance of the order. Osiris grew up to become the most famed magician in all of Egyptian history. When Setnir died and his heart was weighed against the feather, he was given admittance to see Osiris and was reborn in the heaven of Duat. Many years later, Osiris also joined him in the heavenly sphere of the afterlife. The shipwrecked sailor. The boat pulled into its port. The sailor stepped off his boat, weary and crestfallen. His servant followed him onto the port while carrying his master's bags. The servant was smiling and elated to have finally returned home. His master, the sailor, was not. His long voyage had yielded nothing worthwhile. The entire journey was a waste of time and resources. They had returned to the court of their king with no extra provisions, no treasures, no rewards, not even with information. They had traveled long and far and had nothing to show from their voyage after returning home. "Thank the gods, for we have arrived safely and all is well," the servant said with elation. The master grimaced at his servant's joyful disposition. Soon his servant would be able to return to his family, while the sailor would have to step before the king and announce that his expedition had been a failure. "Why do I sense a lack of love for your returning home, master?" the servant asked. "Do I even need to answer that? The king will have my head. I have gained nothing from this voyage to win over his heart. Yet, we have returned in good health and all of our men are safe," the servant reminded his master. "Nothing is more important than that. Maybe to you, but I now have to face the king, which is far worse than anything that could happen on any voyage at sea." "The mouth of a man saves him," the servant said. His master asked him what such a cryptic remark was supposed to mean. "Before you see the king, let me tell you a story that may inspire faith," the servant said, then began his story. "I was once a sailor as well, but captain even. Once my men and me, all 150 of us, set out to ride the Red Sea. These were not weak men either. They all had the hearts of lions. The weather was fair at first. We were arrogant and assumed that no storm of Set would bombard us. Yet we were wrong. All at once the sky went dark and a tempest attacked our ship. I dare not recount how our ship was destroyed, but all you need to know is that I grabbed onto a plank in the water which carried me away, and if I hadn't, then I surely would have died, the same as did every other man I was sailing with. When I awoke, I saw that I was on an island. I hid under the trees, wanting nothing more than to get as far away from the violent sea as I could. By morning, the storm subsided, and the waters had calmed down. The sun was shining, and I thanked Amun-Ra for sparing my life. I quickly learned that there was no other person on the island except for myself, yet there were plenty of plants and animals. Finding food was not a problem. On my third stranded day, I built a fire and offered up some of the food I had collected as an offering to the gods. Then I feasted on a fish and was as content as a man could be under such conditions. I then heard a noise as loud as thunder and looked about frantically for a bolt in the sky or crashing wave. Yet the sound had come from no force of nature. What I saw was even more terrifying than thunder or a wave. I saw a serpent that was 30-40 feet long, slithering right towards me. Its eye flashed like lapis lazuli, and its scales were flecked with a golden hue. The serpent coiled itself before me and lifted its head high into the air. It then looked down at me and, believe it or not, the beast spoke to me. "Why have you come to my island? Tell me, quickly. Why have you come to this place? Hurry, hurry. Tell me something I have never heard before. Tell me something new to my ears. Tell me now." I was too shocked to respond to the serpent, and the creature lost what little patience it had. He wrapped around me, and I surely thought I would die right there. Yet, the serpent only picked me up and slithered across the island while holding me tight. He lifted me by his mouth, but did not bite down. He dropped me inside a cave, and then hurled his questions at me again. He then said, "What brought you here? Stop avoiding my questions and tell me why you are here. Tell me now." I did not want to anger the serpent any longer and bowed before him as if the monster were the pharaoh himself. Then I told him how I had been sent on an expedition under the order of my king. I told the beast about how all of my comrades had been swallowed by the sea. I explained how I had ridden a plank to the island and lived there for 3 days. After hearing my story, the serpent calmed down and began to show me remorse. He said to me, "Fear not, little one. If your story is true and only you were spared from the unforgiving sea, then you must have been selected by Amun-Ra himself to arrive on this island that is blessed with all good things. And I also know your future. You will remain here for 4 months. Then a ship will come and rescue you. Many years from now, when you are old, you will die comfortably in the city that you love more than any other and be buried in a tomb." Then the serpent told me even more. He said, "Now I will tell you what this island is, and then you will have a story to one day share with your pharaoh and anyone else you pledge servitude towards. This island is my home, and I am not alone. I am only one of 75 serpents. The only other human to ever visit here was a female who was scorched by the fires of heaven. Yet I see that her fate is not your fate. She was punished by the gods while you have been blessed. She lacked patience and had been possessed by fear after she came here, but your heart is steadfast." I then told the serpent that, if his words were true, that I would return and honor our meeting by retelling the story of our encounter. I then told the serpent that I would return to his island with gifts of perfumes, incense, and sacred oils. The serpent laughed at my words. He told me that, "No, you will not. First, there is nothing you can bring to this island that is not already needed here. Second, when you leave, this island will vanish from your eyes, and it will never appear before you again. Do not question what I say." For 4 months I lived on that island and was supplied not with everything I wanted, but everything I needed. As the serpent had foretold, a ship came sailing upon the island one day, and I was rescued. The ship was Egyptian, and they briskly returned home with me. I could not find the serpent again before leaving, and as we sailed away, I watched the island sink into the water and vanish before my eyes. When I returned, I gave my king the food and gems that I had collected from the island. The king then appointed me as a servant, and I have been paid handsomely since then. That, my master, is my story. The servant's master listens to the tale from start to finish, but even then his spirit was not lifted out of the doldrums of his despair. Do not be arrogant, my friend. Why give food to an animal at dawn before it's slaughtered in the morning? The sailor then marched on to face the king, having misunderstood the moral of his servant's story. The Adventure of Sinuhe. Sinuhe was an official who worked for a king of Egypt named Sehetepibra. Sehetepibra's kingdom was engaged in warfare with a neighboring region and had sent out a platoon of soldiers to turn the tide of battle. Among those sent out was Sinuhe. Sinuhe was reluctant to travel away from his kingdom and enter a fight that he was not sure could be won, but did so anyway. As Sinuhe was resting between battles, the wind carried a grave message of misfortune to his ears. Sehetepibra, his king, was assassinated while Sinuhe and the rest of the army were away from the kingdom. This was the worst news Sinuhe could have feared to learn, and in a panic, he abandoned the Egyptian army. He didn't know for sure how the king was murdered, but that was irrelevant. All he knew was that the home he never wanted to leave had been usurped by invaders, and it was no longer his home anymore. His exodus was blind. Sinuhe only wanted to get away from the violence of war and had no idea of where he was going. He wandered the desert for what seemed like a lifetime, scouring for little food and water. He managed to survive with only what little rations he had stolen from his camp before giving flight away from the Egyptian army. When he ran out of food and realized that the desert would not offer him any more, he all but gave up hope. Sinuhe still marched on, but did so without faith in his heart. He was running to live, but dying from running. As he journeyed further, he eventually came across a waterway. Seeing this shocked Sinuhe. He knew that if he had come across water that was not of the Nile, then he must have been very far away from the sons of Egypt. He drank some of the water and rested underneath a lonesome sycamore tree that was near the creek of the waterway. While resting and staring at the water, he was reminded of Maat, whose truth was as light as a feather. Sinuhe wondered if he had made the right choice by leaving the land of Egypt behind. He wondered if he had betrayed the law of Maat by fleeing his countrymen. He wasn't sure what fate had planned for him, and could only hope that he had not betrayed the law of Ma'at beyond restitution. A man with an appearance that Sinuhe had never seen before, named Renetu, came upon him and showed pity. He took Sinuhe into his tribe and taught him the customs of his people. Sinuhe was very grateful for being given a second home and promised allegiance to Renetu's tribe in every manner. Sinuhe remained in his new tribe for so long that he eventually was no longer considered a foreigner to his new home, but more of a brother in arms. He then was later introduced to Renetu's daughter, fell in love, married her, and had several children. After marrying into the tribe, he was given many difficult tasks. The tribe, though wanting to remain peaceful, began to be attacked by bandits, and Sinuhe was the first to step up and defend his second home. He fought many difficult battles, invaded enemy camps, took prisoners as hostages, stole livestock and provisions, along with committing many other acts of war. Sinuhe had done such great work for Renetu's tribe that, after Renetu died, Sinuhe became the leader. Even then, his heart was still lacking fulfillment. He had originally fled from his home of Egypt to avoid warfare and violence, but it seemed that no matter where he went, he was destined to fight and shed blood. Sinuhe acquired a reputation for being a defender of his tribe, and because of this, a bullseye was placed on his back. There was a night where a very skilled assassin assaulted Sinuhe, and the two of them fought from the dusk of the night until the dawn of morning. By the end of the fight, Sinuhe had emerged the victor, but his heart grew weary with distraught. While glancing down at the assassin that he had killed, he began to mutter a prayer to the gods of Egypt. Sinuhe wished to return home, and when the day came, die in the land that he had run away from. If the gods had decided that no matter where Sinuhe went, he was to be surrounded by violence, then he thought it was better to return to Egypt and be a warrior there, instead of anywhere else. Only a few days later, his prayer was answered. An envoy from Egypt had traveled all the way to Renetu's tribe, specifically to give Sinuhe a message. The stories of Sinuhe's fame while living in a foreign nation had made their way to Egypt, and the current king, Senusert, wanted Sinuhe to return to his home. By then, Sinuhe was elderly. His wife had passed away, and his children had grown to adulthood. Sinuhe bestowed the honor of being the tribe leader to his eldest son, and began his return to Egypt. He did not know what to expect upon his return to Egypt. He thought that he may have been thrown in prison for being a traitor to his country, but even so, he would rather have died a prisoner in Egypt than a leader anywhere else in the world. When he returned to Egypt, he was greeted with open arms. King Senusert asked Sinuhe if he would reclaim the position of an official and advisor that he had run away from so long ago. Sinuhe accepted the position and served the throne of Egypt for the rest of his life. When he died, he was buried in an Egyptian tomb, proving that the home he had abandoned had forgiven his error. Before Sinuhe died, he spoke to a magician. Sinuhe wanted to know why he had not been punished by either the throne or gods for deserting Egypt. The magician performed a divinatory rite and asked the gods on Sinuhe's behalf why he had been blessed with good fortune for being a deserter, instead of receiving punishment. When the maid was finished, he told Sinuhe that it was all because of the goddess Hathor. Hathor had watched over Sinuhe his entire life, including all the time he had spent away from Egypt. Sinuhe may have run away, but he was still a child of Egypt. All the children of Egypt were under Hathor's jurisdiction, and even if one of them were to run away, she would never ignore one of her children when they asked for forgiveness. Sinuhe had to travel far and learn many lessons through harsh experience, but near the end of his life, he discovered what it truly meant to be blessed by the gods. The peasant and the workman. There was once a peasant who made his living selling salt and other minerals. He was once traveling, peddling his wares, and came upon a canal where a man named Tahuti Necht lived. Tahuti Necht was the son of a man named Asri, who worked for the high steward Meruitensa. Tahuti-Necht saw the peasant coming down the road with his donkeys and became jealous. "I wish I had some donkeys of my own right now," Tahuti-Necht began to plot. "Nor would I mind gaining some of that peasant's wares. He is just a simple peasant while I am the son of a man who works for the high steward. Any peasant's possessions belong to me. Now, how do I go about claiming what is mine and not his?" Tahuti-Necht developed a plan. Being the son of a rich man, he had his own servants at his beck and call and ordered one to bring him a shawl. He then placed the shawl in the center of the narrow road and waited for the peasant to pass by. When the peasant came upon the shawl, he was forced to drag his donkeys over it. The road was too narrow and there was nowhere else to walk. "Halt!" Tahuti-Necht stopped the peasant. "What are you doing? Do you intend to drive your animals over my clothing?" "Oh, my apologies. This shawl is yours? Then I will try to avoid walking over it." The kind peasant then steered his tired donkeys up the hill towards a cornfield. Taking the road would have been far easier, but the peasant was looking to avoid trouble. "My corn is up there," Tahuti-Necht said. "Dragging donkeys through my corn is even worse than dragging them over my shawl. I have to leave, and this is the only road available, and you have blocked it with your clothing," the peasant argued. The two men began to argue. While the peasant was distracted by Tahuti-Necht, one of the donkeys absent-mindedly began to eat a stalk of corn. When Tahuti-Necht saw this, he chastised the peasant. "Your beast has stolen my corn. This crime must be corrected. I will take your donkey. Consider that payment for stealing my corn." "This is trickery," the peasant cried out. "I am being robbed in the land of Meruitensa, he who is well known to severely punish all thieves. I am going to report this to Meruitensa." Tahuti-Necht laughed at this. "If you think that Meruitensa will listen to you over me, then you are mistaken. Your animals and wares are now mine." Tahuti-Necht then beat the peasant until his arms grew tired and breath ran short. He stood over the wounded peasant and laughed again. The peasant pleaded and begged for Tahuti-Necht to return the few possessions that the peasant owned, but Tahuti-Necht only laughed more in the peasant's face. Even still, the peasant pressed on, trying to get his animals and wares back, but Tahuti-Necht told him that if he didn't go away, then he would kill him. The peasant then sought an audience with Meruitensa. By the time he found him, the high steward was getting ready to embark to a court that was called the Judgment Hall. The peasant bowed down before Meruitensa and begged him to hear of his grievance. Meruitensa didn't have the time or concern to listen to a meager peasant and sent out one of his vassals to hear the peasant's complaint. The peasant explained all that Tahuti-Necht had done to him and told the vassal to look over his bruised face if he needed proof of Tahuti-Necht's crimes. The peasant's case was not considered a top priority, but Meruitensa eventually brought the complaint to the judgment hall. The peasant had to wait weeks for the high steward to hear his case, but the peasant had used that time to prepare himself for the hearing. When he stood before Meruitensa, he displayed an elegance that was normally reserved for a nobleman, and spoke with a poetic flair that inspired Meruitensa to listen to what he had to say instead of discarding him as a lowly peasant. Meruitensa was so moved by the peasant that he brought the case to the king himself. The king listened to the story and then gave his order. "Do not speak any more to this peasant. Write down his case and bring his words to me in writing. Also, provide him and his family with food and drink, but do not let him know where these rations have come from." Meruitensa did as the king ordered. He had food and drink delivered to the peasant's home, but never left a clue of who had provided them. Although receiving these provisions made the peasant's life more manageable, he still desired the sword of justice to fall upon Tahuti-Necht. The peasant returned to the judgment hall a second time, and then a third. Meruitensa had grown tired of seeing the peasant and hearing his case over and over, and ordered him to be beaten. He did not just make this harsh command out of spite, but to see if the peasant would finally give up his case. Even after being whipped and beaten, the peasant returned to the judgment hall a fourth time, then a fifth, and sixth. His desire to see justice be brought upon Tahuti-Necht never wavered, and every time the peasant returned to the judgment hall, he always spoke with a poetic dignity. Meruitensa told the peasant to give it up. His speeches may have been eloquent, but there were far more important matters for the High Steward to give his attention to than the ramblings of a peasant. Yet the peasant continued to return, and on his ninth attempt, Meruitensa ordered the guards to surround him. The peasant trembled in fear as the guards surrounded him, but still did not waver. He knew that another beating was going to be unjustly delivered to him, and remained true to his purpose regardless. Meruitensa then spoke to the peasant. "You are a very resilient grub," Meruitensa said. "Your efforts and speeches have impressed me many times. I have started to believe that your story is true, though it pains me to learn the true nature of Tahuti-Necht. My gods, do as I say. Listen to his story one more time and write down every word he says." So the peasant repeated how he had been robbed and beaten by Tahuti-Necht again, and the guards recorded every word in perfect detail. The story was written on papyri and delivered to the king. When the king read the peasant's story, he was very impressed by the eloquence of speech that was the peasant's words, that he decided to side with the peasant and deliver justice upon Tahuti-Necht. Tahuti-Necht was removed from his station. All of his property was taken away and given to the peasant as recompense. Tahuti-Necht was then banished from the land and told never to return. The peasant was given the office that Tahuti-Necht was removed from, and he moved into the palace of the king. He brought his family with him and became an overseer to the king, who was charged with the special task of judging the complaints and grievances of all the other peasants. The taking of Joppa. There was once upon a time a king of Egypt named Men-Kheper-Ra. He ruled through conquest and territorial expansion, warfare. He had sent out his troops to the region of Joppa, which was located in a neighboring country, with hopes of gaining a new territory, but the battle was taking a dreadfully long time. His soldiers were shrinking in number along with his kingdom's resources. King Men-Kheper-Ra knew the tide of battle needed to be turned in his favor, and sent out one of his most celebrated generals, Jehuti. Before Jehuti was sent out to siege Joppa, Men-Kheper-Ra told one of his servants to take my cane and hide it among Jehuti's baggage. My cane has always worked great wonders, and I wish to send my power along with him into battle. When Jehuti arrived at the foot of Joppa with his army, the first wave of the battle was already over. Jehuti and his soldiers had to walk through a graveyard of their fallen clansmen. Wasted bodies and broken armor were strewn all over the battlefield. "Stay strong," Jehuti ordered his men. The sight of his fallen countrymen saddened his heart, but a good leader could never let their own fears or apprehensions weaken the spirits of their soldiers. Jehuti ordered his troops to set up an encampment to situate the soldiers and prepare them for battle. They were less than a mile away from the gates of Joppa, and Jehuti could tell that whenever the fight began, there would be great bloodshed on both sides. He arranged scouts to hide in the shadows and give a warning if there was any sign of an approaching enemy. Later that night, the scouts gave out their warning signal, and Jehuti told his men to prepare for battle. Then he realized that the army of Joppa was not approaching yet. Instead, only a single chariot entered into Jehuti's encampment. The lone chariot was occupied by the Jehuti's enemy, the general of Joppa's army. He brought a small platoon of his own soldiers, but they all claimed to have come in peace. "I demand to speak to the man who leads this invading force," the general of Joppa said. "This war has gone on long enough, and I have come to establish an armistice." Jehuti had come to the land of Joppa well prepared for a multitude of situations. Although he never assumed he would use them, before setting off for Joppa, he had 200 sacks constructed out of bronze feathers. What he had made and brought these sacks for was a secret that he refused to reveal unless the most opportune of situations presented itself. Jehuti and the general of Joppa went inside of Jehuti's tent to see if they could come up with a peaceful resolution to the war. Jehuti had no intention of surrendering, nor would he ever return to his king without completing his mission. Despite this, he spoke with the general of Joppa at great length. They shared many stories, drank alcohol, and enjoyed plenty of hearty laughter. Jehuti thought it was a shame that the general of Joppa was such a fine man. If they had met under different circumstances, then perhaps the two men could have become great friends. But, alas, war is hell. The two generals had so much fun drinking and making merry inside Jehuti's tent that the general of Joppa had been convinced that the summit for peace had been successful. He began to speak of trading items and treasures to confirm that peace had been established between the two armies. It was then that the general of Joppa noticed the cane of King Menkaper-Ra. By the gods, what a glorious cane that is! I will take that as my prize for issuing this summit of peace. Jehuti did not know what the general of Joppa was talking about at first. Then he looked to where the general was pointing and almost erupted in surprise. Almost, but he did not want to give his true intentions away, so he swallowed his surprise back down and made sure the features of his face remained unchanged. How the cane of his king had wound up in his tent, he did not know, but it gave him the opening that he needed to execute his grand plan. Your eye is sharp. That is the cane of my king, and there is no other in the entire world that is comparable to it. The cane of a king. Hearing that only makes me want it all the more. Give it to me to prove that you accept my offer of peace. Give it to me and prove that you submit to my wishes more than the wishes of your king. Of course, Jehuti said. Before that, though, you should know that giving offerings of peace was in my plans all along. We have already prepared food and gifts to deliver into Joppa. We have brought 200 sacks of various treasures. Load those onto your chariot first, and then I will give you the cane you adore so much. Why not give me the cane first? The general asked with skepticism. It is my kingdom's tradition to save the greatest gifts for last. Jehuti lied. The general of Joppa said he understood. He ordered the 200 sacks to be loaded onto the chariot. What he didn't know was that while he was drinking in Jehuti's tent, soldiers were crawling into the sacks. Jehuti told his men to hide in the sacks, and when they were carried into Joppa like normal luggage, to break out and siege the city. After the 200 soldiers in disguise were loaded onto the chariot, the general of Joppa then asked for the royal cane again. Jehuti picked up the cane and approached the general, his foe that would have been a friend under lighter circumstances. Here is the cane that has captured your attention so much. Jehuti then bashed the cane into the bridge of the general's nose. The general dropped to the ground and Jehuti pounced upon him. They scraped, clawed, and struggled in a quick fight, but Jehuti overpowered the general of Joppa and strangled him into unconsciousness. Jehuti then seized the general's men who were waiting in the chariot. He showed them that he had captured their general and then gave them an ultimatum. You will do as I say without question, or else your general dies right here and now. The soldiers of Joppa could not bear to be responsible for their general's death. They agreed to do exactly whatever Jehuti told them to. Several minutes later, the chariot, with 200 sacks piled in the wagon, pulled up to the gates of Joppa. One of the soldiers of Joppa shouted a message to the guards inside. We return with grand news. The enemy has fallen. We have captured their leader, Jehuti. Jehuti sat in front of the chariot. He was bound by a rope and held the countenance of a defeated man. Not only have we taken their leader, but we have sieged their provisions. The soldier driving the chariot then pointed to the 200 sacks. The guards inside Joppa spread the good news, and then the gates to Joppa opened to receive Jehuti. When the warriors of Joppa opened the door to the chariot, they became confused. "Where is our general?" they asked Jehuti. He didn't answer at first and simply remained quiet and idle while bound by the rope. They then pulled a sword out and placed the edge of its tip up against Jehuti's throat and repeated the question, "Where is our general?" Jehuti then looked the warrior in the eye and opened his mouth. He didn't tell them where the general was, but instead gave the order to attack. "Siege Joppa," Jehuti shouted. The soldiers hiding ripped their way out of the sacks and burned Joppa down from the inside out. They gave no quarter. They showed no mercy. The walls of Joppa were stained with blood, and the ground was lined with cracked armor and the corpses of the dead. After walking through the graveyard of their fallen countrymen on the way to Joppa, the Egyptians had no notion of mercy left in their hearts. They acted swiftly and mercilessly, and that was the day that Joppa fell. During the skirmish, one of Jehuti's soldiers cut him free and handed him a sword. He had taken many lives that day, and although there was remorse somewhere in his heart, he knew that a soldier must accomplish his mission no matter what. Jehuti tossed the general of Joppa in prison. He then sent out a team of scouts to return to Egypt and report that they had taken over Joppa. The battle had been won. "And when you see King Men-Keper-Ra," Jehuti told his scouts, "tell him, I greatly give thanks for letting us borrow his royal cane." The Treasure Thief. There was once a pharaoh named Ramesses III. Out of all the pharaohs who had ever ruled in Egypt, Ramesses was by far the wealthiest. His gold, silver, precious stones, and all the rest of his worldly treasures were the pride of Ramesses. They were the apple of his eye. Whenever he had the chance, he would surround himself with his treasures and run his hands over their surfaces, or lift them up to his nose and try to inhale their very essence. His prizes were so cherished and beloved that Ramesses began to worry that someone may attempt to steal them. "My treasure must be protected. Normal vaults simply will not do. I will need a treasure house that is unquestionably impenetrable." Ramesses summoned his architect, Horemheb. Horemheb was not just an architect, nor even a royal architect. Horemheb was so skilled and renowned that he was granted the title of Master Builder. When Horemheb came before the pharaoh, Ramesses told him that he was to build a vault to house all of his treasure, but not just any normal vault. "Make the floor of solid stone. Make the wall so thick that no man or even an army could ever even poke the tiniest hole in it. Reach the roof up to the heavens themselves, and etch it into a pyramid so that nothing may be able to enter, even from above. There is to be only one entrance into this pyramid, and the door will be as thick as the walls." Horemheb bowed low before Ramesses. "O great pharaoh, life, health, and strength be to you. I will gladly build you this house of treasure. When it is finished, no man or beast will ever be able to even fathom entering it. Breaking through my structure will be beyond all logical comprehension. This I swear to you." Ramesses was positive that Horemheb would do as he had promised. He told him that he would pay him very handsomely, and collected all of the masons and workmen of Egypt to do whatever Horemheb told them to. The work took many laborious months to complete, but Horemheb had made good on his vow. He had built the most impenetrable structure that the world had ever seen. As Horemheb had promised, not even an army would have been able to break into the mighty treasure house. Horemheb even went beyond what Ramesses had asked. He did not just install one door, but 3, and each one was as thick as the walls themselves. The 3 doors all had the same exact lock, and the only key that would open them was in Ramesses' possession. Ramesses then placed his own royal seals on the doors as an extra measure of defense against any who may be foolish enough to try and steal his treasure. Ramesses paid Horemheb very handsomely and continued to extol the greatness of Horemheb, the master builder. There was something Horemheb never told Ramesses about his treasure house. He had cut out a path that was a secret entrance that led directly to the room that contained all of Ramesses' precious treasures. This secret path was undetectable, for it matched the rest of the structure and looked like a seamless stone wall. This was Horemheb's great secret, and he carried it to his grave, almost. Many years later, Horemheb had grown old and sick. He had lived a long life and had no regrets, yet he knew that he would soon be joining Osiris and Anubis in Duat, and before passing to the other side, he called his sons over to him. "My children," Horemheb addressed his two sons, "you are both my precious treasures. No amount of gold or silver could ever amount to the love I hold for both of you. A shame it is that there are other men in this world who value silly things instead of understanding what a true treasure is." Both of his sons heard his heartfelt words and gave their father a tender hug. However, neither of them knew exactly what he was talking about. Then Horemheb told them more. "Listen, my sons, there is something you must know before I meet Anubis. There is a secret passageway that I cut into the pharaoh's house of treasure. I will tell you where it is, so that, whenever the need may arise, you may take a treasure and sell it. If you do this sparingly and only take small prizes, a ring, pearls, a cup, then you will easily acquire enough to live comfortably. The pharaoh has so many treasures that if you only take what is small, he will never know that anything has left his pyramid. But I warn you, do not become greedy. If greed enters your heart, then trouble will also enter your heart." Horemheb passed away into the Duat, and for many years his sons followed his wise advice. They abstained from greediness and only stole what was small from the pharaoh, and Ramesses never noticed anything was missing. As they both grew older, they got married and both had children. Their families clamored for more of this and more of that until both of the brothers were running low on money. The two brothers had entered the treasure house many times by then and had become arrogant. They let greed enter their hearts, and they began to steal the more opulent and larger treasures. Ramesses would often go inside his pyramid and sit with his treasures. He was enthralled with counting his money or gazing upon works of art that were his and his alone. One day, while he was doing this, he realized that some of his beloved prizes were missing. Yet as far as he knew, there was no entrance inside his treasure house except for the series of doors, and he had the only key that would open them. None of his royal seals had been broken either. Ramesses set a trap in his treasure house to catch the thief. Dangling above his treasure room, he had his blacksmiths place a black cage that was set to drop when a lever was pressed. He placed the lever on the floor of the treasure room and disguised it to blend in with the rest of the floor. The next night, the sons of Horemheb returned to the treasure house. As they were stuffing their pockets with everything they could pawn, one of the brothers stepped on the hidden lever. Crash! The cage plunged down from above with a large crash and trapped the brothers. Both of the brothers pried and pushed, smashed their fists against the bars and kicked wildly, but they had as much luck moving the cage as if it were a massive boulder. "I have been trapped like an animal. Father was right, greed has entered my heart and ushered my ending. Surely Ramesses will know who I am when he finds me. He could not have forgotten a child of Horemheb. And when he does find me, he will torture me and kill me." The brother outside the cage pondered over the trap. "You are trapped in there pretty good," he said to his caged partner in crime. "Maybe Ramesses will go easy on you. Perhaps he will show mercy since Horemheb was our father." "How can you say that? I will surely be tortured to death. But Ramesses won't stop there. He will hunt down all of my family and yours, just to eradicate all of our bloodline from Egypt. I know this looks bad, but we shouldn't give up yet. Defeat is never the only option." Yes, my brother, there is an option besides total defeat. I must die so that you and both of our families may live. I'm not so sure I like the direction this is going, the brother outside the cage said. I will pass my sword, which I also consider a member of my family, the brother in the cage said as he pushed his weapon between the cage's bars. Remove my head. Slice it clean off as if I were not a brother to you, but a common robber. Then take my head out of this place and bury it. That is the only way we can prevent the Pharaoh from ravishing our families with his vengeance. The other brother outside the cage thought his siblings have gone mad. He continued to assault the cage until his hands bled and knuckles bruised. He then realized that his brother's idea was not hysteria, but the truth. There was no other option to prevent Ramesses from identifying them as the thieves, besides for him to decapitate his own brother. After the deed had been done, one brother held the other's head in his hands. He couldn't move for some time. Trauma had taken over him. This was the price of having greed enter the heart. For one to live, the other not only had to die, but the survivor had to become a murderer of his own brother. The surviving brother eventually found enough will and sense to escape the pyramid. He carried his brother's head deep into the desert and buried it. He vowed then and there to never steal again. He vowed to never let greed enter his heart again. He swore that he would do everything he could to become a true student of Marat and win back the approval of the gods. He swore to change every aspect of himself. Yet, none of what he vowed or swore was meant to be. The next day, Ramesses entered his pyramid and was elated when he saw that the cage had dropped from the ceiling. Now I will know who was foolish enough to steal my treasure. When he saw that the body was headless, he fell into a fit of rage. How can this be? The headless body tells me nothing. I still don't know who the thief is or how he found a way inside. All I know is that whoever cut off this head must be without mercy, and also extremely clever. Ramesses knew he had to outsmart whoever the thief was. He took the body of the headless intruder and had it hung upon the city gates for all to see. He placed a pair of guards to watch over the corpse. Ramesses knew that the family of the headless bandit would not be able to stomach seeing their kin being treated so poorly in death. Without the blessing of Isis and Nephthys, without the wrappings of Anubis, without having his organs removed from the body, the soul of the thief would never find its way to Duat and would be nothing more than a tortured phantom. Ramesses was sure that whoever the bald thief's mother was, she would never allow the body to remain unburied. Ramesses told the guards that he placed before the body that if anyone passed by and shed a tear, offered a prayer, or tried to touch the body in any way, then they were to be arrested and thrown in jail immediately. As Ramesses had planned, when the deceased robber's body was discovered by his mother, she was distraught and instantly demanded her other son to retrieve the body and give it a proper burial. She even went so far as to threaten to tell Ramesses herself who the body really was if he didn't go and get it. The treasure thief tried to persuade her otherwise, but his efforts were for naught. None of his words moved her, and she forced him to undertake a theft that was even more daring than stealing from the pharaoh's tomb. So the thief wandered to the city gates where the corpse of his brother was hung up, with an armed guard on each side of it. He disguised himself as a merchant and brought 2 donkeys along with him as he strolled up to the corpse of the man he had killed, his own brother. In the saddle of each donkey, he had placed a cask of red wine. This is what my life has turned into. What a detestable lot I have fallen in. I have killed my brother, and now I have to rob his corpse. If I did not know better, I would assume myself mad. The plan he had devised to distract the gods and steal his brother's body was concocted with half a dose of insanity and another half of clever genius. He did not believe that his scheme would work and considered turning away as he approached the gate, where his brother's body swayed in the wind. The foul stench of death entered his nostrils, and he fought off the urge to vomit, then soldiered on. I can still turn away. Oh, screw it. If I am going to be arrested and tortured to death, I may as well have some fun with all this madness. As he walked up to the guards, they both began to scrutinize him with their eyes. Here goes nothing. Before the guards could say anything, he lightly kicked one of the donkeys, making one stumble into the other. As he had planned, one of the casks of wine fell out of a donkey's saddle and smashed into pieces when it fell to the floor. "By the gods, no!" the thief screamed. "Not my wine. Not my precious and delicious wine." The two guards were shocked and confused by the thief's, who they thought was a merchant, sudden dramatic cry. The thief began to flail about in a theatric panic as he scrambled over the red wine that was seeping into the ground. "I have been cursed, cursed, I tell you." He then stood up and grabbed the other cask of wine and looked at the guards. "You two, help me. One of my wine casks is broken while the other is cracked. Soon I will have no wine at all. Quick, we must drink it before it all goes to waste." He then thrust the cask of wine in one of the guards' hands and ordered him to drink it. "Drink. Drink it now and become drunk." "This cask doesn't look broken to," one of the guards began to say. "Damn your opinions and drink," the thief cried. The other guard then snatched the cask out of his partner's hands and said, "Only an imbecile would ever turn down free wine," and he began to drink. The bottle was passed between the thief and both guards for several rounds, and it quickly ran empty. While both of the guards drank several mouthfuls, the thief had drunk none. He had cut a hole in his shirt and was sneakily pouring the wine down there instead of in his mouth. After all the wine was gone, both of the guards became very tired and quickly fell asleep. As the thief was removing the body from the gate and placed it over his donkeys and then covered it with a blanket, a thought occurred to him. "I can't believe that actually worked. I am either the greatest thief in all of Egypt, or this world has truly gone utterly mad. My life has become an absurd and dark comedy." He made sure to leave the empty cask with the guards, and before he left, he had another idea. Just to rub it in, he shaved one side of each of the guards' faces as they slept. When the pharaoh discovers these men, they will be embarrassed, and he will be enraged. He then returned the body of his brother to his mother's abode and laughed like a madman the entire walk home. The guards were awoken by the foot of Ramesses kicking them. The two men, charged with watching over the headless body, snarled like drunks, looked like fools with half of their faces shaven, and had no idea where the body had disappeared to. Ramesses severely punished both of them and then went about devising another trick to catch the thief that had cleverly eluded him. Ramesses had a daughter who was not only beautiful but also very talented. She was skilled in the art of dancing and was a master at playing the harp. Ramesses was so determined to catch the thief that he ordered her to cover up in a disguise and perform in the poorer parts of town. During her performance, she would have an interlude where she would ask the audience some questions. You are to ask the crowd what is the most sinister and most clever things they have ever done. You will then tell them that if you are impressed with their answer, then you will dine with them as a reward. Ramesses knew that many men fancied his daughter, and he was sure that using her as bait would reveal who the thief was. The treasure thief was sitting at the bar during one of these performances, drinking his sorrows away, and when he heard the woman on the stage ask her question, he became very suspicious. Really? This is what you are trying now, Ramesses? This test of wits has far past the realm of absurdity. If that's the case, then I may as well continue to prove that I am not only the craziest man in all of Egypt, but also the cleverest. The thief visited the cemetery and, by a stroke of luck, saw that there was a funeral going on for a criminal. He waited for the people to leave, and then dug up the criminal's body and cut off the arm. Yes, I have been through much stress and can admit the truth to myself. I have lost my mind. My actions may not be of mad, but at least I have grown used to cutting off people's body parts. Later that night, he returned to the bar where Ramesses' daughter was performing with the severed arm under his cloak. As he approached the bar, he noticed that armed guards were stationed everywhere and easily determined that they were looking for him. He figured that the woman performing on the stage would give them the signal when she had discovered who the thief was, but his sanity had flown away from him long ago, and he was looking forward to an even more brazen act than robbing Ramesses' treasure house or stealing his dead brother's body. Is there anyone in the audience who can tell me the wickedest and the cleverest thing he has ever done? The princess asked. Yep, right here. The thief baldly stood up and approached the stage. The most wicked thing that I have ever done is decapitate my own brother after robbing the pharaoh, among other things. And the cleverest thing I have ever done is steal my brother's headless body from the city gates right while I was standing next to the guards. And the dumbest thing I have ever done is confess all of this right now. He then looked to everyone else in the bar and said, I'd like to see any of you top that. The princess grabbed onto the thief and shouted to the guards that she had caught the robber. Yet when she looked back to what she was holding onto, she saw that the thief was gone and she was only holding onto a severed arm. She screamed while holding the arm and the thief disappeared into the night. By then, Ramesses had admitted that he had been defeated. He knew that he would never catch the thief and even started to become impressed by the bandits' bravado and cleverness. He made an announcement to all of Egypt that if the thief came forward and revealed himself, then Ramesses would pardon him of all his crimes. All Ramesses wanted to know was how the thief broke into the treasure house to begin with. The thief had lost the will to continue the game of cat and mouse and decided to step forward even though he assumed that Ramesses' promise of giving pardon was a lie. When Ramesses saw the thief face to face, he began to understand what had happened. The son of Horemheb, the master builder. Ah, I see. Your father truly was a genius, and honest. He did not lie. No man had ever poked a hole in my pyramid, nor were the royal seals ever broken. But tell me, how did you get inside my treasure house? The thief came clean and confessed that his father had left a secret entrance and told him where it was while he was on his deathbed. Ramesses thought this over and then laughed heartily. The thief bowed his head and awaited his torture and punishment, even looked forward to it. He could no longer carry on his game of madness and simply wanted the curse to end. Ramesses then made an announcement. This man is far too clever to punish. If anything, he should be honored. What? I will reward this man for all he has done, Ramesses proclaimed. Seriously? Not only that, but if this clever thief decides to serve me with loyalty, Ramesses continued to proclaim, loyal to you. I have been robbing you for years. I even forced a severed limb on your daughter. Then I will continue to lavish him with rewards. I do not even... mad. This world has gone utterly mad. Ramesses made good on his promise to the thief. Still, to this very day, the legend of the treasure thief continues to be sung. He has gone down in history as one of the cleverest men to ever be born in Egypt. The girl with rose-red slippers. The days of ancient Egypt were coming to an end. The Persian army was in the midst of a growing conquest, and the current pharaoh Osiris II needed to increase his nation's defenses by any means necessary. In order to do this, Osiris opened the gates of Egypt to the people of Greece. By this point, the nations of Egypt and Greece had developed a relationship with each other. Osiris knew that if the Greeks were to consider the land of Egypt as a second home, then they would help to defend Egypt from the growing Persian army. To expedite the budding relationship between Egypt and Greece, Osiris gave the Greek visitors a city all their own, which was called Naucratis. The Greek people, who were already accustomed to trading their goods with the people of Egypt, quickly flocked to Naucratis, not just to increase the ventures of their various businesses, but also to revel in all the beauty and wonders that Egypt had to offer. All the way from the island of Lesbos came an elderly merchant named Chadaxos. He had spent the majority of his life trading with the merchants of Egypt, and as he was settling into old age, he decided to relocate to the city of Naucratis and spend the last of his years in the nation that had given him great wealth. Chadaxos was already well known and respected in Egypt. He had no trouble locating or affording a home within Naucratis. He selected a magnificent house that was larger than all the rest and happily began his retirement. He purchased some slaves from the local market and treated each one with dignity and grace. They may have been slaves, but Chadaxos was more of a father than a tyrant to them all. Chadaxos had bought and sold many slaves during his years as a merchant and was sympathetic to their plight of servitude. One day, Chadaxos was gallivanting about Naucratis, simply enjoying his wealth and retirement. Chadaxos held both the gods of Egypt and Greece in equal esteem and took great pleasure in visiting the temples located in Naucratis. After paying homage to both Anubis and Hermes with equal respect, he was heading back to his magnificent house when he came upon a large and rowdy crowd of people. Curious as to what all the fuss was about, he decided to examine further. When he pushed his way to the front of the massive crowd, he became sorely disappointed. It turned out that there was nothing more than an auction going on for slaves, which was very common in Naucratis. Chadaxos already had plenty of slaves, and saw no reason to add another servant to his household. He went to turn away and return home, but then noticed something peculiar. He recognized that the amounts of money being tossed around during the biddings were extremely high, even for slaves. He then realized that everyone in the crowd was all trying to bid on the same slave. Curious, he stepped forward to examine closer. Then he saw her. Chadaxos was struck with awe upon first sight of the slave girl. He knew she must have also been Greek because her skin was white, her hair was brown, and her cheeks were flushed with a rosy red. Chadaxos instantly understood why so many people were willing to spend their entire fortunes on such a girl, for she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. Such a lovely girl must not be reduced to slavery. I am going to buy her no matter how much I have to pay. Chadaxos then entered the bidding war, and since he was so wealthy, he easily crushed the competition in hopes of acquiring the girl. Many in the crowd were envious and angry with Chadaxos, but all knew that there was nothing they could do to compete with his wealth. Chadaxos took the girl away from the crowd and walked her back to his home. While they marched back to Chadaxos's magnificent house, he asked the girl what her name was and how did she become a slave to begin with. She was slow to speak at first, but eventually warmed up to her new master enough to answer his questions. "My name is Rhodopis," she told him gingerly. It was difficult for Rhodopis to tell her story. Immediately her eyes began to well up with tears. For many years, Rhodopis had been harboring a grief that had spawned back in her childhood. When she was very young, living in northern Greece, her home was attacked by pirates. Her family was slain before her eyes, and then she was stolen away by the pirates and suffered much cruelty. When the pirates had grown bored of her, they sold her to a wealthy man who lived on the island of Samos, and her life as a slave began. While living as a slave on Samos, Rhodopis made one true friend. He was another slave like her and was an ugly little man named Aesop. She adored Aesop despite his appearance. He was always extremely kind to her and often told her fantastic stories about the animals and gods. While living as a slave on Samos, hearing Aesop's stories were the only shining light in her life. Yet the man who owned her became greedy for even more money and sold her to a merchant in Naucratis. She was never even given a chance to say goodbye to Aesop, her only friend. Once she was relocated to Naucratis, the merchant who had bought her said that he was astounded by her beauty. He told her that she would fetch a very high price and instantly put her on the market to be sold. "And now I have been sold to you," Prodopis told Charaxos, "and I assume that you will put me to work or sell me to someone else for an even higher price." Charaxos's heart split in two as he listened to her sorrowful tale. Her life had been nothing more than one horrible misfortune after another. Even further, Charaxos could tell that she had a loving heart. He took her by the hand, looked her in the eyes, and told her exactly what he was going to do to her. "My dear, your days of living as a slave are now over. You deserve so much more than what the gods have given you, and I have made a determination. I will buy you your own house and give you your own servants to attend to your every need." Prodopis did not believe Charaxos at first, yet only a day later he had made good on his promise. He bought her a large house that had a grand pool and a glorious garden. He then provided her with dozens of slaves. Charaxos made it no secret how smitten he was with the girl, and often told her that he had fallen in love with her. He also told her that she did not have to return his love. She was young, while Charaxos was very old. He knew better than to trap her into marriage with him. Simply being in her company from time to time and giving her the most luxurious gifts was enough to make Charaxos a happy man. He gave her clothes of the finest fabrics and the most exquisite jewelry that he could afford. Prodopis was deeply thankful to Charaxos and constantly asked him what she could do to repay his good nature. "I do not want a single thing from you, my dear," he told her, "but there is something I want for you. I hope that one day you meet a young man who is worthy of your hand in marriage, and that he gives you gifts that make mine humble in comparison." For some time, Prodopis lived elegantly in her new home. She treated her slaves as if they were her brothers and sisters and allowed all of them to partake in the pleasantry of her pool and garden. She was a simple woman who had been raised in a life of turmoil and was ecstatic to have a home of her own. She never took any of the gifts that Charaxos had given her for granted and cherished every single one of them. She did have a favorite gift, though, which was a pair of rose-red slippers. At least once a week, she would slide them on her feet and stroll through her garden before stepping into the pool. It was a simple hobby, but it was also her favorite activity as a free woman who had once been a slave. On one day that was extremely hot, she put her slippers on and headed off for the pool. She stripped naked and relaxed in the calm waters, wondering how she could have had such a fantastic turn of good fortune. "The gods must finally be smiling upon me." Then she heard a screech from above. She looked up and saw a falcon soaring high in the sky. She was mesmerized by the beautiful bird, never before having the opportunity to see one so clearly. She stood up and smiled as the bird circled high above her pool. She may have been Greek, but she also knew that the sacred animal of Horus was a falcon. Again, she thought that the gods were smiling at her. Then, the falcon started to descend closer to her, and Prodopis became frightened. Her admiration for the bird quickly turned to fear, and she prayed to Hermes to protect her from harm. The bird swooped down, grazing only inches above her scalp, then landed right next to the clothes and rose-red slippers that Charaxos had given her as a gift. The bird turned his head towards her, gave her one very strong stare, and then snatched one of the slippers in his talons and flew off. Prodopis tried to chase the bird, but she only had legs while he had wings. She was also naked and had to cover up if she was to follow the bird across the sands of Egypt. Although she wanted nothing more than to retrieve her stolen slipper, she knew well enough that it was not to be. Instead of chasing the bird further, she fell to her knees and wept an ocean of tears. She knew that she would never see her slipper again and felt as if she had betrayed her great friend and savior, Charaxos. Why did I not protect my beloved gifts? For several nights, Prodopis hardly ate, hardly slept, then shed many tears. She convinced herself that she was a fool for ever thinking that the gods would smile upon one such as her. She considered the theft of her slipper to be her punishment for not honoring both the gods of Greece and Egypt with equal reverence. Far away from Rhodopis' home in the city of Memphis, Amasis the pharaoh was addressing the plights of his people inside of his courtyard. As he was trying to tell them not to fear the threats of the Persian army, a falcon with a red slipper in its talon soared down and landed right between him and his loyal subjects. Both Amasis and the entire crowd froze in place. All of the people of Memphis knew that falcons were sacred to Horus. Everyone took the arrival of the bird as either a sign of good tidings or an omen of a great evil. The bird then lifted into the sky again, and before it flew away, it dropped the slipper directly onto the pharaoh's lap. The falcon then disappeared into the sky, leaving everyone dumbstruck. Amasis carefully examined the slipper that the falcon had given to him. He looked it over in silence for several minutes before saying anything. "The gods want me to meet the owner of this slipper. Why they would demand such a thing, I do not know. Yet the will of the gods must be carried through." He then stood up and gave his people a decree. "Let my messengers and scouts go forth. Take this slipper with you and find out who it belongs to. Explore all of Egypt, from the low to the high if you must. Do not leave even one single grain of sand unchecked until the owner of this slipper has been found." Later that day, his vassals did as they were ordered. For several weeks they scoured all of Egypt for the foot that the slipper had fallen away from. They traveled from Heliopolis to Tanis, and then from Tanis to Canopus, and still further until they had finally reached the city of Naucratis. By then, Amasis' search party were tired and distraught. They had traveled far and wide to find the owner of the red slipper, and had come up with 0 leads. While in Naucratis, they heard of the story of a beautiful slave girl who was sold to a wealthy merchant before she was given a grand house of her very own. This story stimulated the curiosity of Amasis' vassals. To hear about a simple girl rising up from a lowly slave into a life of luxury was something that could only happen if the gods were smiling upon her. The search party visited Rhodopis and found her in a grieving state. Ever since the falcon had stolen her slipper, she had become distraught. Yet, when she saw it again, she exploded in happiness and cried tears of joy. Even so, the men who had traveled all the way from Memphis had to be sure that they had found the proper owner of the rose-red slipper. When Rhodopis showed them the other slipper that she had kept, they could not argue with her any longer. They told her that it was an order of the pharaoh, that whoever the slipper belonged to must return with them to Memphis and speak with the pharaoh. Rhodopis knew that an order of the pharaoh could not be refused. She bid farewell to Charaxos and traveled all the way to Memphis. When Amasis saw Rhodopis, he fell in love with her at first sight. He told her that she was to become his queen and rule Egypt by his side. Charaxos was invited to the wedding, and before Rhodopis took over the throne as queen, he told her, "I have received my wish. You have found a young man that will give you gifts that make mine seem humble in comparison." Charaxos returned to Naucratis and lived out the rest of his retirement peacefully. Amasis and Rhodopis had a long reign as king and queen. During their time of leadership, the Persian army was kept at bay. 1 year after Amasis and Rhodopis passed away, the Persian army finally made their way to Egypt and started a new era of history. That is the story of Rhodopis, the girl with the rose-red slippers. She had elevated from a foreign slave all the way up to the Queen of Egypt. During her reign, never again did she ever doubt that the gods of both Egypt and Greece were smiling upon her. Conclusion. Thank you for making it through to the end of Egyptian mythology, classic stories of Egyptian myths, gods, goddesses, heroes, and monsters. During its era, hardly any other culture on Earth was more affluent and influential than Egypt. There are several reasons attributed to the great expansion of ancient Egypt, their pantheon of gods and goddesses, and the stories that housed their characters helped shape what was, and still is, one of the most magnificent cultures this world has ever known. There are many tidbits of wisdom in the stories you have just read. Some of these are somewhat hidden, while others are in plain sight. If you would like to push your knowledge even further, then it is now up to you to continue your research on your own. Visit your library or go snooping online. It doesn't matter how you decide to continue your studies of ancient Egypt. All that matters is that you continue to learn more and apply the wisdom ensconced in the lessons of the ancients. Whenever you revisit any of these classic stories, a new dawn will surely rise before you.